You are the last person alive who can read the marks carved into these seals. Not the last person on Earth. The last person in this city. Every other scribe who once understood the script has died, moved on, or simply stopped being asked to write it, and nobody younger ever fully learned it from you because there was less and less reason to bother. You sit in a small room built from the same fired mud brick as everything else in this city, walls straight enough that a builder could have laid them yesterday, and you turn a small stone seal over in your hand. It shows a bull, and above the bull, a short line of symbols you can still read, the way you might still remember a language your grandmother spoke but nobody around you speaks anymore. The city outside your window is called, by the people who live in it, something we will never know, because that word was never written down in a script we can read today. Archaeologists 5,000 years later will call it Mohenjo-daro. Right now, to you, it is simply home, and it is quieter than it used to be. Picture what quieter actually looks like from where you're sitting. The Great Bath, a massive brick-lined pool at the center of the city, waterproofed with a layer of bitumen so precise that it barely leaks even now, still holds water, but fewer people gather around it than when you were young. The city's drainage system, covered brick channels running beneath nearly every street, still carries wastewater away exactly the way it was designed to, an engineering achievement most cities on Earth won't match again for thousands of years, but there are fewer new houses being connected to it. The granaries near the citadel still stand. They simply aren't as full. None of this looks like collapse. It looks like a city getting a little smaller, a little quieter, one ordinary season at a time. If the idea of an entire skill, a script, a specific way of organizing a city, quietly running out of people willing to keep it alive is the kind of quiet erasure that hooks you, stick around, because that exact pattern of knowledge simply not getting passed down is something this channel keeps finding, in city after city, and subscribing means you won't miss the next one. Here's what should genuinely surprise you. Nobody today can read what you're holding. The script carved on that seal in your hand, what modern researchers call Indus script, remains undeciphered, more than a century after archaeologists first uncovered it. The Finnish researcher Asko Parpola has spent much of his career trying to crack it, comparing symbol patterns across thousands of recovered seals, and even he readily admits the honest state of the field. Without a bilingual inscription, something like the Rosetta Stone that lets scholars crack Egyptian hieroglyphs by comparing them to known Greek text, nobody has proven what language, if any single language, these symbols even represent. Think about what that actually means. This isn't a story about a mysterious lost language nobody ever understood. You understand it right now in this room. The mystery isn't the script. The mystery is what happened to everyone who could read it. So what did happen? For decades, the popular version of this story blamed sudden violence, dramatic invasion, the kind of ending that makes for an easy documentary narration. That version doesn't hold up well against the evidence anymore. The Cambridge archaeologist Cameron Petrie has spent years studying the broader collapse of urban centers across the Indus Valley, and his research points somewhere much quieter than invasion. Working with sediment and pollen records across the region, Petrie's team has documented a weakening of the summer monsoon across the very centuries when cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa were shrinking. A shift subtle enough that no single year would have looked catastrophic, but persistent enough, decade after decade, to steadily undercut the agricultural surplus that had let cities this size exist in the first place. Here's where it gets specific enough to actually picture. A city the size of Mohenjo-daro, likely home to tens of thousands of people, depended on a hinterland of farms producing more grain than those farming families needed for themselves, freeing up labor for scribes, brickmakers, seal carvers, traders, and the administrators who apparently oversaw one of the most standardized systems of weights and measures in the ancient world. When that surplus thins out generation after generation, you don't get a single dramatic famine. You get exactly what you're watching from your window, a slow trickle of people moving towards smaller, more self-sufficient settlements, because a city built for administrating surplus grain has less and less to actually administer. The archaeologist Jonathan Mark Kenoyer, who has spent decades excavating at Harappa itself, adds a piece that connects directly to you, sitting in your room holding that seal. Kenoyer's excavations show that the standardized weights, the uniform brick sizes, the widespread trade seals like the one in your hand, all point to a civilization that ran on a remarkably unified administrative system across an enormous territory, larger than either ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia at its peak. That kind of system needs specialists. It needs people like you. And a system built on specialists is only as resilient as the pipeline that keeps training new ones. That pipeline is exactly what's breaking, quietly, in the room you're sitting in right now. Not because anyone decided to let it break. Because fewer merchants need sealed goods verified when trade routes are thinning. Because fewer administrators need standardized records when there's less surplus grain to track. Because a smart young person watching the city empty out season by season makes a completely reasonable choice to learn farming instead of scribal work, since farming still puts food on the table when the city's administrative economy doesn't. Nobody in this story is a villain. Nobody burned the libraries because there weren't libraries in the way we imagine them, just seals and short administrative marks. Nobody invaded and slaughtered the scribes. The knowledge simply stopped being useful enough, quickly enough, for anyone to make sure it survived the next generation. And once that happens to a script with this few specialists ever spread across this large a territory, the loss isn't gradual erosion. It's closer to a light switch, functional and transmitted one generation, gone entirely a generation or two later, because there was never a large enough base of ordinary literacy to fall back on, the way, say, Latin survived for centuries after Rome fell purely because enough ordinary clergy and scribes across Europe kept using it for other things. Let's go back to the seal in your hand, because the object itself tells you more than the symbols carved into it. Turn it over. The reverse side is smooth, worn from decades of being pressed into wet clay to stamp a mark of ownership or authorization onto sealed goods, the ancient equivalent of a signature and a security tag combined. You didn't carve this one. Your teacher did, and his teacher before him, and that unbroken chain of instruction is the actual fragile thing this story is about. More than the city, more than the drainage system, more than any single building. Think about how that chain of instruction actually worked while it was still intact. A boy, probably around 10 or 11, would have been apprenticed to a working scribe, not in a formal school building the way we might picture education today. Archaeologists have found nothing resembling one, but likely through direct household apprenticeship, the way a trade skill gets passed down. He would spend years learning to recognize hundreds of distinct symbols, learning which combinations appeared on which types of goods, learning the physical craft of carving steatite stone precisely enough that a stamped impression would come out clean and legible. That's not a skill you absorb by observation. It requires someone actively deciding you're worth the years of teaching, and it requires the wider economy still needing scribes badly enough to make that investment worthwhile for both of you. Now picture the specific moment this pipeline actually breaks, because it wouldn't have looked like a decision. It would have looked like a shrug. A merchant father in Mohenjo-daro, watching trade caravans arrive less frequently than they did in his own father's time, watching the granary registers show smaller numbers each season, looks at his talented 10-year-old son and makes an unremarkable, completely reasonable choice. Better he learns to manage the family's remaining fields than spend 6 years training for scribal work in an economy that needs fewer scribes every single year. Multiply that ordinary, defensible household decision across dozens of merchant families over several generations, and you get exactly what modern archaeology finds in the later layers of these sites. Seals becoming less common, less finely carved, and eventually not appearing in the archaeological record at all, long before the cities themselves were fully abandoned. That gap matters enormously. The script died out before the cities did. People kept living in reduced, smaller versions of these settlements for generations after nobody was carving new seals, farming, trading locally, using simpler pottery, everyday life continuing in a form archaeologists call the late Harappan phase. The population never vanished. The Indus Valley's descendants are very likely among the ancestors of people living across modern Pakistan and northwest India today, the same way Maya descendants live across Mesoamerica, the same way Khmer descendants live across Cambodia. What disappeared wasn't a people. It was one very particular, very specialized layer of administrative culture that the ordinary continuation of daily life simply no longer required or could afford to sustain. So here is the uncomfortable question this video actually wants to leave you with, and it isn't a comparison to some other civilization's warning signs, because you've heard enough of those already. It's this: think about the specialized knowledge your own world runs on right now, the handful of engineers who understand a specific legacy system still running a piece of critical infrastructure, the small number of specialists who know how to maintain a particular kind of machinery, the aging workforce in any number of technical trades where almost nobody is being trained to replace them. None of that knowledge looks endangered while the people who hold it are still alive and still being asked to use it. It only reveals itself as endangered the way Indus script did, at the exact moment the last person who understood it stops being asked. And by then, there's no seal left to translate what was lost. You are the last person alive who can read the marks carved into these seals. Nobody has asked you to teach anyone in 3 years. You tell yourself there's still time,